The rope bites into Milo's throat, a rough, hemp knot that smells of old rain and fresh blood. He hangs suspended over the slick cobblestones of Giltwater's execution square, his feet kicking uselessly at empty air. The crowd below is not cheering. They are waiting. They are hungry, cold, and desperate for a reason why their world keeps collapsing. Above him, the sky is a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of more acid. Rain. To his left stands Irix Thorn, clad in robes so white they seem to repel the grime of the city itself. In her hands, she holds a scroll sealed with the crimson wax of the crown. The official who cut the rope that failed to snap has already stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag, waiting for confirmation. Milo gasps, his face turning violet, but he does not scream. His eyes lock onto Irix. He sees the glow beneath her skin, the faint, pulsing red lines of the system that connect every citizen in this square to the massive tax ship hovering in the river outside. Lines of obligation. Lines that should be binding people together, not strangling them. If he dies here, if the lever is pulled, Giltwater becomes mere collateral, stripped and sold to pay for a war. No, one remembers fighting. The rope creaks under his shifting weight. Irix raises her hand to signal the drop. Milo's lungs burn. He has seconds to change the ledger or cease to exist. Stop, he croaks, the word tearing at his damaged vocal cords. Check the wall. Irix pauses, her finger inches from the release lever. She looks down, amused by the irony of a condemned man giving orders. The debt is clear, Warden. Your life balances the account. It doesn't balance. Milo wheezes, straining against the cord. The crown took the tax. Where is the wall? Show me the wall. Milo looks at Irix's immaculate tax seals and says, you cannot seize collateral from a creditor. And right now, your crown owes this city more than it can afford. It all started with the smell of wet ash and the sound of 1,000 people holding their breath in the dead silence before a sentence is carried out. Milo Vey opened his eyes to the sensation of hemp digging into his neck, the coarse fibers biting into skin that had not felt this kind of immediate, visceral threat since the subway tunnels collapsed beneath London. He hung there, suspended over the execution square, waiting for the weight of his own body to snap his spine or for the lever to be pulled and end the agony. Irix Thorn stood on the platform beside him, her posture perfect, her expression one of mild professional interest rather than malice. She was a creature of order in a city unraveling at the seams. To her, this was not murder. It was arithmetic.
The Crown has spoken.
Her voice calm and clear over the quiet square.
Giltwater is insolvent. The debt is due.
Milo struggled to draw breath through the constriction. He focused on the red lines glowing in his vision, stretching from every citizen below to the tax ship on the river. They were not just debts. They were anchors. And anchors could be cut. Read it, Milo managed to say. Read the order aloud. Irix unrolled the scroll. The wax seal shattered with a soft click as she broke it. By decree of the High Treasury, all assets within Giltwater are hereby repossessed. The citizens are declared defaulters. Their lives are valued at 3 copper pieces each for labor, or 0 if broken. A murmur rose from the crowd below, a sound like wind through dead leaves. They were not afraid of death. They were afraid of being worth nothing.
You're seizing us, as property, as collateral.
Irix corrected. She leaned forward, looking down at him with pity that was worse than hate. You failed to collect the protection tax for the eastern sector, Milo. The breach is your fault. The Crown requires restitution. The wall didn't fall because of me, Milo lied. Or maybe he didn't lie. He didn't know what had fallen yet. He only knew the numbers were wrong.
The system records show the tax was paid. Payments are recorded. Performance is verified by results. The wall is gone. The people are unsafe. Therefore, the service was not rendered. You owe the difference.
I owe nothing.
The effort making his vision spot.
I invoke an emergency audit, Article 4 of the Civic Compact. I demand a review of the collection versus delivery ratio.
Irix sighed as if he were a child throwing a tantrum.
There is no time for audits, Warden. The rain comes. The debt must be settled. The system recognizes a breach before execution.
He stared into her eyes, willing her to see the code behind her.
Check the ledger, Irix. Check the wall contracts.
Your life is the balance, she replied. She looked at the executioner. Pull the lever. The crowd below held its breath. Milo closed his eyes, not in fear but in calculation. He focused on the red lines connecting him to the city. They were heavy, but they were also connected to something larger, the Crown. The entity that owned everything. If the Crown owed the city, the contract was inverted.
Wait,
Her hand froze on the lever.
what did you say? I said.
Milo gasped that the Crown owes us 12 years of defense. Irix's hand twitched, but she did not pull. The air around the gallows seemed to stiffen, the heavy rain pausing mid-fall as if the world itself were holding its breath for an answer that had no right to exist. She looked from Milo's violet, straining face to the scroll in her other hand, then out toward the gray horizon where the tax ship loomed like a dying leviathan.
You are hallucinating.
Her voice was steady, but it lacked its usual metallic clarity.
The Crown collects first. The Crown verifies later. You have no authority to audit your own executioner.
I have authority because I am the debt warden, Milo choked out. His fingers scrabbled at the hemp knot, finding no purchase, only the slick, cold wetness of the rope. Article 4. Breach of service triggers automatic suspension of collateral seizure until balance is restored. You can't take a city from a creditor without paying the debt first. Irix lowered the scroll slightly. Her eyes narrowed, calculating the risk. To hesitate was to show weakness in front of 3,000 starving citizens who viewed her as their final judge. But to pull the lever while the system hung on a technicality was to invite chaos that no amount of blood could wash away.
Prove it, prove the breach. I don't have time.
Milo screamed, his throat raw from the constriction. Check the ledger, look at the lines, look at what you've taken and look at what's gone. Irix turned her gaze upward. She did not look at the sky. She looked at the space just above the crowd's heads, where the glowing red threads of debt stretched taut from every shivering body toward the distant ship. With a flick of her wrist, she invoked the royal assessor's sight. The world dissolved into streams of data. She saw them, hundreds of thousands of red lines, thick as ropes, pulling from the citizens' chests into the ether. But unlike normal debts, where the line ended in a black void of payment, these lines terminated in the jagged, empty gap, a hollow space where the wall should have been.
The wall.
The word fell out of her mouth like a stone.
The wall is gone.
Exactly, Milo gasped. You took the tax, 12 years of it, and you gave us nothing but rain and rot. That is not service, that is theft. Irix stared at the empty gap in the ledger lines. The red glow pulsed, erratic and angry, reflecting off her white robes. If she pulled the lever now, the system would register a double breach. The Crown failing to deliver protection, then executing the only man who could verify it. The backlash would shatter the contract. Giltwater would not just fall, it would become an outlaw zone, stripped of all legal protection, left to rot in the dark without even the dignity of official reclamation. The crowd below sensed the shift. A murmur rippled through them, louder than before, hands lifted from pockets, shoulders squared. They were no longer waiting for death, they were waiting to see if their warden was bluffing. Before we get into the story, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what story you want to see next. Now, let's begin.
If you kill me,
Her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that only Milo could hear.
the contract dies with you. The Crown loses the claim entirely. You are holding a city hostage with a ghost. I'm holding a city hostage with the truth.
Milo corrected. His vision swam, black spots dancing in his periphery, and the truth is written in the ledger. Look at the balance, Irix. Really look at it. Irix's fingers trembled as she traced the glowing path from the tax ship back to the square. The numbers scrolled past her eyes, a torrent of crimson figures. Protection tax, collected. Defense delivered. Null liability, unpaid. The gap widened with every second. The red lines began to fray at their source, not breaking but reversing color. The debt is inverted, Irix breathed. She looked up, her face pale beneath the wax of her seals. You are right. Milo forced a laugh, though it came out as a wet cough.
I don't need you to admit it. I need you to stop pulling that lever. The Crown cannot seize an asset it does not own.
Her voice gaining strength as she accepted the new reality.
If the wall is gone, the Crown is in breach. The city is no longer collateral. It is a claim against us.
Then clear the debt, Milo demanded, or let me live to collect it. Irix looked at the executioner, who was still standing frozen by the lever, his hand hovering over the release mechanism. She snapped her fingers. "Stand down," she ordered. Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command that carried the weight of the royal seal. "The execution is suspended pending audit." The executioner blinked, confused.
Ma'am, the order was clear. Repossession immediate. The order is void.
She rolled up the scroll, tucking it into her sash with sharp, precise movements. "The crown owes a debt. Until it is paid, no life in Giltwater may be claimed as payment for another." She looked back down at Milo, who was gasping for air, his face slowly returning to color. There was no pity in her eyes now, only a cold, sharp calculation. She had saved him not out of mercy, but out of necessity. He was the only one who could read the ledger that just turned against her master. "You are alive by technicality." Milo dropped to his knees, his lungs burning as he dragged air into his starved body. The hemp bit deep into his neck, leaving angry red marks that throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He looked up at Irix, who stood over him like a statue carved from ice and authority. The rain plastered her white robes to her skin, but she did not seem to care. She only cared about the numbers. "You are alive by technicality, Warden," Irix continued, her voice crisp and detached, cutting through the drumming rain. "Do not mistake suspension for absolution. The Crown still holds the claim. We merely renegotiated the terms." Milo pushed himself up, his legs trembling beneath him. He grabbed the edge of the gallows platform to steady himself. His vision was clearing, but the red lines in his mind were still screaming. He could feel them connecting every citizen below to the ship offshore. They were not just debts anymore. They were chains, and for the first time, they had a knot that he held the end of. "Renegotiated?" Milo croaked. His voice was raw, scraped thin by the rope. "You call this renegotiation? You left me to hang." "I called for an audit," Irix corrected. She turned her back on him, walking toward the edge of the platform where the city sprawled out in a grid of gray misery.
The system confirmed the breach. The Crown's failure to maintain the wall constituted a material default. Therefore, the collateral status of Giltwater is suspended pending settlement. And who decides when that settlement happens?
Climbing down the steps behind her. His boots slapped against the wet wood.
You or the ship? The contract dictates the timeline.
Not looking back.
But the contract also recognizes the authority of the debt warden to negotiate on behalf of the insolvent party, which means you have a choice.
Milo stopped at the base of the gallows. The crowd below had fallen silent. 3,000 people stared up at him, their faces pale and wet, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. They were waiting for him to jump back onto the block or to lead them out.
What choice?
Irix turned around. Her expression was unreadable. A mask of polished porcelain.
You can accept the Crown's offer of immediate repossession. The city becomes state property. The citizens become indentured laborers to pay off the debt. Order is restored, and if I refuse,
Milo asked.
then you contest the repossession. You invoke the right of sovereign claim. You declare Giltwater a creditor entity, not a debtor asset. But be warned, Warden. If you do this, you bind the city to the Ash March clans. You take them off the ledger of the Crown and onto the ledger of war.
Milo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. The Ash March clans. The nomadic bands of raiders and traders who lived in the dark beyond the river. They were monsters in the stories told to children, but they were also the only power strong enough to stand against the Crown.
You want me to sell my people to barbarians?
His voice hardening.
I want you to save your people from starvation. The Crown will strip Giltwater bare if it repossesses the city. Food stores seized. Trade routes blocked. Every citizen worked to death in the mines of the capital. The clans offer food. They offer protection. They demand only service.
And what service?
He stepped closer to her, ignoring the guards who tightened their grip on their spears.
What do they want? Your labor, your ingenuity, and your ability to manage the debt you have just uncovered. The Crown owes Giltwater 12 years of defense. That is a massive sum. The clans are willing to buy that claim from the Crown, provided you facilitate the transfer.
Milo looked down at the crowd. He saw a woman holding a child tight against her chest. He saw an old man leaning on a crutch, his eyes hollow. They were not just numbers, they were lives, and they were terrified.
Why me?
Why not let the Crown handle it? Or let the clans seize the city by force? Because force creates debt that cannot be paid.
Her voice dropped, becoming almost gentle, which was more frightening than her cruelty. But a contract? A contract can be balanced. You are an accountant, Milo. You know how to balance books. Can you balance a city's survival against the wrath of the crown? Milo looked at the red lines in his mind. He saw the flow of gold away from the city and the lack of protection coming in. It was an impossible equation. Unless he changed the variables.
I need proof.
Proof that the crown is willing to sell the claim, and proof that the clans will honor it. Paperwork travels faster than armies.
She reached into her sash and pulled out a second scroll, sealed with black wax. Here is the draft agreement. Sign it, and you become the bridge between Giltwater and the Ash Marches. Refuse, and I pull the lever myself in 1 hour. Milo took the scroll. It felt heavy in his hands. He unrolled it slightly, seeing the legalistic flourish of the crown's seal next to a jagged blood-red mark that smelled of iron and earth.
This isn't just debt.
Looking up at her,
This is surrender.
Irix waited, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her ceremonial dagger. It was not a threat. It was a punctuation mark. Read the penalty clause, she said. If you decline, the crown assumes Giltwater has forfeited all sovereign rights. The tax ship will dock in 10 minutes. The guards will begin their collection. Milo looked down at the parchment. The ink shimmered with a faint, oily iridescence that hurt his eyes. He scanned the text, his mind racing through the legal frameworks of two worlds. Earth's corporate law was clean compared to this arcane nightmare. Here, debt wasn't just money. It was reality.
And if I sign,
Milo asked.
who holds the pen? The Ash Marches hold the pen. We only witness.
Milo laughed again, a harsh barking sound that scared the nearest guard into stepping back. You're trying to make me a puppet, Irix. You think if I bind myself to the clans, I lose control. But look at the ledger lines. He pointed up toward the sky, though there was nothing but storm clouds above. They don't stop at the city limits. They go straight to the tax ship. If I sign this, I'm not binding Giltwater to them. I'm redirecting the debt. I'm making the clans responsible for every copper piece the crown stole from this city. Irix's eyes narrowed.
That is a risk to your safety, Warden. The clans do not forgive defaults. They don't have the choice.
He snapped the scroll shut and handed it back to her.
Tell them I'm ready to negotiate, but tell the crown to stand down first. Real-time suspension of repossession. Or the deal dies with me.
Irix took the scroll. She didn't look surprised. In fact, she looked almost pleased. You are learning quickly, she said.
Very well, I will convey your terms. But know this, the crown does not like to wait, then let them starve.
He stepped past her, his body brushing against the cold iron of the gallows post. The crowd began to murmur as he descended. Whispers rippled through the 3,000 faces below. Hope? Fear? It didn't matter. They were alive, and for now, that was enough. He reached the bottom of the platform. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with the scent of wet wool and impending violence. A group of market merchants blocked his path. They held baskets of rotting fruit in empty hands. Lord Warden? The lead merchant asked, bowing low. Is it true? Has the crown relented? Milo looked at the man's hollow cheeks. He saw the same desperation in his eyes that he had seen in the boardrooms of Earth. They wanted a savior. But Milo wasn't a hero. He was an auditor. And auditors didn't save people. They saved balance sheets.
Go home.
His voice flat.
Eat what you have left. Hide your valuables. Tomorrow, we have work to do.
The merchant hesitated. Work, my lord. What kind of work? Milo turned away, walking toward the gates of the execution square. A figure stepped from the shadows of the gatehouse, blocking Milo's path. It was not a merchant. It was a guard captain, his armor slick with rain, holding a scroll case that gleamed wetly.
The crown does not like to wait,
His voice flat.
but they do pay for speed.
Milo stopped. The crowd behind him held its breath,
I am busy negotiating survival. Then this is an invoice.
extending the case.
For the immediate suspension of the tax ship's cannons. 100 gold marks. Due before the hour ends. I have no gold. I have debt. Debt is abstract. Gold is real, or you may contest the repossession openly right now. But be warned, Warden. If you invoke the audit, the crown will seize every asset in the square before the ink dries.
Milo looked at the scroll case. Then he looked up at the tower where Irix watched.
Let them come. I'll balance their books in blood if I have to. You speak like a madman, Warden. Or a genius. Call it professional hazard.
He turned to the merchant leader beside him.
Do you have silver?
The merchant trembled.
We have the collection for today. For the grain tax. Give it to me.
He extended his hand. The captain watched, frozen by protocol. The merchant fumbled in his basket, pulling out a heavy pouch of coins. It was all they had, all they could eat for a week. Milo took the pouch and tossed it to the captain. Tell your ship that Giltwater is no longer a debtor. We are a creditor, and creditors do not pay until the service is rendered. The captain caught the pouch, weighing it in his hand. He looked at Milo with something like respect.
The crown accepts this as good faith, not forgiveness. Just delay. Delay is time, and time is money.
As the captain ran toward the docks, the red lines in Milo's vision flickered, then shifted. The glow turned from angry crimson to a cold, steady amber. A new line appeared, stretching out of the city walls toward the dark tree line of the ash marches. It pulsed. Milo Vey stood amidst the ash-choked ruins of the counting house, the smell of burnt parchment and old blood thick enough to taste on his tongue.
I found them.
His voice flat against the roar of the storm. Seraphine Vale wiped rain from her eyes with a gauntleted hand, her gaze scanning the shadows of the burned walls for any sign of returning guards or angry mobs. We don't have time for books, Milo. We need steel. The ash marchers are gathering on the ridge, and Thorn's men are circling the perimeter. If you're going to save this city, it needs teeth, not receipts. Teeth won't fill bellies, boy, he grunted, spitting into the ash. I've got 300 families sleeping in the sewers because their pantries are empty, and their debts are full. You want to talk about saving Giltwater? Give me grain. Real grain. Not this inkwash nonsense. You both speak of what we lack, but look at what we hold. He tapped the page with a trembling finger. Half the city is scheduled for indenture within the month. The Crown has classified Giltwater as insolvent collateral. Once the execution order is signed, we aren't citizens anymore. We're inventory. Seraphine snarled, stepping forward and slamming her hand onto the stone slab, cracking a page.
Then let them come. My guard will fight until we are broken. No.
Pulling his hand away from the paper as if it were hot.
Fighting is how they collect. Violence is just another form of settlement, and we are already bankrupt of it. I can stop the indenture. I can break the Crown's lien on our lives, but I need leverage. Leverage?
A harsh barking sound that echoed off the wet walls.
What leverage? We have no gold, no weapons, no food. You're drowning in paper and calling it power.
I am drowning in obligation, Milo corrected, turning to face them both. Debt is a cage built by the powerful. But a cage is only evil when I do not hold the key. And right now those keys are scattered across every household in this city. The smallest debts, the ones for bread, for medicine, for a single night's shelter, they are still active. They are small enough to forgive, small enough to make. Seraphine stared at him, her expression hardening into skepticism. You want to give away what little value we have left? You just threw away money we do not have. Milo shook his head slowly. No. I stopped charging people for being poor. Now let's see what they can build when they aren't waiting to be punished. Bram spat again, shaking his head.
It's a fool's game. Mercy is a luxury for the Fed. Then let us prove them wrong.
Straightening his spine despite the exhaustion that threatened to pull him down. Call them in. Call every person who owes less than 10 coppers. Tell them their debt is cleared. Tell them they work for Giltwater now, not the Crown. Give me repair crews. Give me ration accountability, and give me time. Seraphine looked at the charred records, then at Milo's determined face. She spat on the floor.
If this fails, I'll hang you from the same gallows they tried to use on you. If it works,
Turning back to the ledger,
there will be no gallows. Only a wall we built ourselves.
Milo turned his back on the stone slab and walked toward the shattered archway that led to the plaza beyond. He stepped out into the square, where the crowd had begun to gather again, drawn by the promise of salvation and the fear of execution. The square was packed, faces pale and wet, eyes hollow with hunger and terror. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a sea of damp wool and despair. At the far end, the execution platform still stood, slick with rain and blood. Irix Thorn was there, perched on the edge like a crow waiting for carcasses, his immaculate uniform untouched by the grime of the city. He watched Milo approach with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Milo climbed the steps to the platform. He raised his hands, not in surrender, but in command. The silence was instant and absolute, broken only by the hiss of rain on hot stone. Who owes less than 10 coppers? Milo's voice cracked, then found its strength. Step forward. No one moved. A fishwife near the front spat on the ground. 10 coppers? You can buy a loaf with that, she shouted over the crowd. My debt is 50. Who owes less? Milo repeated, louder now. Who has been charged for a day of labor they could not perform? Who was fined for breathing air the crown deemed theirs? A young man in the front row stepped out from the mass of bodies. He was thin, shivering in a torn tunic. I owe 4 coppers, he whispered, his voice lost in the wind. For a loaf my mother could not eat. Milo pointed at him. Step up here. The boy climbed the stairs, looking terrified. Irix Thorn leaned forward, intrigued despite himself.
This is Theodore Vey. You cannot pay a city with chalk dust. I am not paying.
He pulled the heavy ledger from beneath his coat. It was soaked, the ink bleeding slightly, but the red lines glowed brighter in the gloom. He opened it to a blank page at the front. I am erasing them. By my authority as the temporary keeper of Giltwater's accounts, I declare these debts null and void. The crown has no claim on bread bought on credit by those who cannot pay. He turned to the boy. You are free. What do you owe? Nothing, the boy said, tears mixing with the rain on his face. It is gone. Milo looked out at the crowd. Who else? Name your debt. State the amount. If it is under 10 coppers, it vanishes. In exchange, you join the repair crews. You work for Giltwater. You eat from Giltwater's stores. You are no longer assets of the crown. You are bones in the body of this city. Another man stepped forward.
5 coppers. For medicine. Erased.
Writing the name on the page with a piece of charcoal he pulled from his pocket. The red line connecting him to the crown snapped visually in Milo's mind, a sharp pop of relief that echoed in his skull. 6 coppers for rent, gone. 1 for a needle and thread, gone. Names shouted out, debts declared, names written. The crowd surged forward, pressing against the ropes Seraphine had ordered her guards to hold. It was chaotic, desperate, loud, but with each name written, Milo felt a drain on his own energy, a physical toll that made his vision blur. He was not just writing, he was binding the city's fate to his will. He was turning liability into equity. Irix Thorn stood up, his smile fading.
This is irregular. You have no jurisdiction over private merchant debts. I am declaring a state of emergency.
Not looking at him.
Under the ancient laws of Giltwater, a city may seize its own means of survival when the crown fails to protect it. I am seizing the labor of those who owe nothing but their breath.
7 coppers for a roof tile. Gone. The crowd roared. It was not a cheer of joy, but a roar of release, of shock, of sudden terrifying hope. Milo kept writing until his arm burned, until the charcoal broke in his hand. He stood panting, the ledger heavy in his arms. The red lines in the city had dimmed, replaced by faint blue threads connecting him to hundreds of new names. Seraphine climbed the steps beside him, her sword still sheathed, but her hand on the hilt. She looked at the crowd, then at Milo.
You did it. I cleared 200 debts.
His voice hoarse.
200 people are now bound to me, not the crown. They have no reason to fear me anymore. They owe me nothing but their work.
Bram Coyle climbed up after them, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at the ledger, then at the crowd below. You've made enemies of every creditor in town, he said.
And you've given away half our grain store. Then you have made them useful.
Closing the ledger with a heavy thud that echoed through the sudden quiet of the platform. He looked down at Bram's ragged hand, then at the crowd below, where the blue threads of obligation pulsed like a slow heartbeat. We are not rich, Bram. We are solvent. Seraphine stepped closer, her shadow falling over Milo's boots. Solvent. You're bleeding out. Look at your hands. Milo glanced down. But he did not let go of the book.
Let them shake. The foundation is set. Now we need to pour the concrete. Concrete doesn't grow on trees.
Leaning against the wooden railing to support his weight.
And neither do walls. You've got 200 people shouting for bread right now, and you're talking about masonry? Who feeds them? The crown stores are locked tighter than a miser's coffin.
The Ash March clans have surplus grain.
His voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at his eyelids.
They trade it for protection contracts. I need you to draft those contracts, Bram. Not promises, legally binding obligations. If they supply the food, they get first claim on the repair labor once the walls are secure.
Nimara Ashwing stepped out from the crowd behind Bram. Her armor was scarred, her skin pale against the dark rain. She held a spear that looked less like a weapon and more like a tool for breaking ice. "You ask my clans to feed your starving dogs?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous.
Why should we care if your walls hold? Let them break. Let the crown take what is left, because the crown is insolvent.
Turning to face her, he did not flinch at the spear tip.
I have audited their accounts. They are already dead. I am simply refusing to let their corpse drag you down with it. Your grain will be paid for in labor that has no market value elsewhere. You want resources? We will give you access to the river trade routes once the port is cleared. That is a currency they cannot inflate.
Nimara stared at him for a long moment, the rain sluicing off her helmet. Then she lowered the spear slightly.
Very well. We will bring the grain. But if you fail to deliver the labor we demand, I will take your heads as payment. Agreed.
He looked back at Seraphine.
Now weapons. You demanded them before.
Seraphine spat over the edge of the platform.
I don't want them yet. I want to know why half the city is suddenly marching toward the counting house with hammers instead of pitchforks. Because they have a purpose. Fear makes men loyal to the executioner. Hope makes them loyal to the builder. They are going to repair the southern gate, right now.
Bram groaned, rubbing his good shoulder. That's suicide. The Ash Wardens still control the outer district. If they see a militia forming— They aren't a militia, Milo corrected. They're a construction crew. We wear work clothes, not armor. We carry shovels, not swords. Let them think we are just cleaning up the mess. Give us one day. Just one day to reinforce the gate before the next inspection. Seraphine narrowed her eyes. And if Irix Thorn shows up? Milo smiled, a thin, sharp expression. Irix Thorn is an assessor. He cares about numbers. Let him see the ledger. Let him see that the value of Giltwater has just doubled because we stopped paying interest on our survival. He turned and walked to the edge of the platform, looking out at the sea of wet faces. The blue threads in his vision grew brighter, connecting him to hundreds of new obligations. He felt the weight of them, heavy and real. But for the first time since he had woken with noose around his neck, it felt like a burden he could carry.
Go.
His voice carrying over the rain.
To the gate. Bring your tools. Bring your hunger. We build or we starve.
Different sound this time. Not desperation, but determination. They surged forward, flowing toward the gates like a river finding its bed.
You just declared war on the crown's economy. I declared peace with my people.
He opened the ledger again to a fresh page. The ink was still wet, glowing faintly in the dark. Now, let's see if we can balance the books before dinner. It no longer fell as an executioner's whip. It fell as water for the mortar. Milo stood in the shadow of the counting house archway, watching the blue threads of obligation thicken around the workers hauling timber from the river docks. Seraphine stood beside him, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes scanning the tree line where the Ash Wardens might appear at any moment. Bram was already gone, screaming orders into the din of hammers on wood, his one good hand waving like a windmill.
You look like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop.
She did not look at him. She watched the workers.
The shoe is falling.
Milo said.
It's just falling in slow motion. Because you're tired.
Finally turning her head. Her eyes were hard, devoid of the softness he had seen in her earlier when she first followed his lead. You gave away 200 names for a pile of wet wood and some promises to a dragon. Do you have any idea what Irix Thorn is doing right now? He's not looking at the gate. He's looking at the books. Milo shifted his weight, the ledger heavy against his hip.
Let him look. The books are honest for once. Honesty is a luxury.
She stepped closer, invading his personal space, her voice dropping to a growl.
We have no weapons. We have no food stockpiles. We have 200 people who think they're heroes because you waved a pen at them. When the Ash Wardens realize we're just soft civilians building their own cage, they'll cut us down. And when that happens, your ledger won't stop a blade. It will stop a hunger, and hunger is what breaks loyalty faster than steel. If Nimara delivers on the grain, she owns our backs until the debt is paid. That's not just food, Seraphine. That's leverage. But you're right about one thing. We need to secure the perimeter.
Then let me move my guards, she insisted. We can hold the inner ring. Let the workers stay on the gate. No. Seraphine, if you put your guards in armor between the workers and the rest of the city, you're telling the workers they're prisoners. You told them they were free when you held that rope. Don't undo that with iron. The rain dripped from the brim of her hat. You're risking everything on hope. I'm betting on accountability, he corrected. If they feel safe building the wall, they'll work harder. If they feel like captives, they'll sabotage it. Trust is the only currency we have left that doesn't inflate. Before she could argue, a figure emerged from the mist near the edge of the square. He was dressed in immaculate black robes that seemed to repel the water, his face pale and composed, utterly untouched by the chaos surrounding him. Irix Thorn walked with the calm of a man who believes the universe owes him order. He stopped 10 paces away, holding a slender staff topped with the crown seal.
Milo, I see you've been busy making yourself relevant. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do while counting your commissions.
Irix smiled, a thin stretching of lips that didn't reach his eyes.
Alive is a low bar for a sovereign entity. But yes, I've noted your innovations. The forgiveness of 200 minor debts is quaint. Truly, it's the kind of sentimental gesture one expects from a dying breed of idealists. It's not sentiment, it's strategy. You know the law. A city under threat can seize its own resources for survival. I activated that clause.
Did you? Irix tapped his staff on the cobblestones. The sound was crisp, final. I checked the royal ledger an hour ago. There is no such clause in the current edition of Crown Statute. You're operating on folklore, Milo. Old wives' tales from a city that doesn't exist anymore. Milo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. The blue threads pulsed, but beneath them he saw faint red lines creeping in. New obligations, new liens placed by Crown auditors.
The system recognizes the breach.
Though his voice wavered slightly.
I invoked an emergency audit. The Crown's failure to maintain the wall is a material default. Default requires collateral, and you have none. Your blue threads are pretty tricks, but they don't pay taxes, they don't feed the royal guard, and they certainly don't stop the repossession order I just filed.
Irix raised his staff. The air around him shimmered with a cold gray light. I am here to seize the counting house, and everything in it, including your authority to bind others. You are trespassing on Crown property. Milo Vey, step aside or be removed. You try that, she said, her voice low and dangerous, and you'll find my blade isn't bound by your statutes. Irix didn't. The black rain hit the deck of the brass Mercy with the sound of thrown gravel, turning the wood slick and gray. Milo Vey stood at the prow, his hands gripping the railing until his knuckles turned white. The river before them was choked by a heavy iron chain that spanned the width of the channel, glowing faintly with old magic. Beyond it loomed the velvet-draped hull of the tax ship, its sails folded tight like sleeping bats.
The chain is live.
Seraphine Vale shouted over the drumming rain. She gripped her sword, her boots slipping on the wet planks. If we cut it wrong, the counter-magic will snap back and take our arms off. Milo looked past the iron links. He did not see metal, he saw lines. The system highlighted the obligations binding the water itself.
I see the ledger.
His voice steady despite the cold.
The chain is tied to a toll contract. It exists only because someone agreed to pay for its protection. You're talking to the rain again?
Turning her head away from him to glare at the approaching vessel. Orlo Vane doesn't care about your accounts. He cares about gold, and we have none. He cares about compliance, Milo corrected. He stepped forward, the water splashing around his ankles.
If I can rewrite the terms of the contract, the chain loses its authority. But I need to get close enough to read the seal. Orlo will shoot you before you take a step.
She checked the ballista on the quarterdeck, its arm broken and useless against the current.
We are 37 guards with no pay and a barge full of starving ghosts. That is not leverage. It is context.
He pulled his coat tighter around himself. The rain soaked through to his skin, but the cold felt clarifying. Vane is a Merchant League officer. They operate on fear of debt collection. If I show him that his own books are bleeding, he will hesitate. The brass Mercy drifted closer to the chain. The iron links hummed with a low, vibrating frequency that Milo felt in his teeth. Above them, a figure stood on the gangplank of the tax ship. Captain Orlo Vane wore a coat of deep crimson velvet, untouched by the grime of the ash marches. He held a spyglass to one eye, watching them approach. Drop anchor. Vane's voice carried over the wind, amplified by magic. This stretch of water is sovereign territory of the Merchant League. Your passage fee has tripled since you crossed the lower dam. Milo raised his hand. He did not shout back. He simply looked at the red lines connecting Vane to the chain. The contract was old, frayed at the edges, but solid. It bound the river's safety to the League's wealth.
We don't have your gold,
Milo called out.
but we have a settlement offer.
A sharp barking sound. He lowered the spyglass and leaned over the rail.
A settlement? From the insolvent city? You must be joking. I've heard the rumors. Half your populace is scheduled for indenture. The crown is waiting to collect. Why would I let grain pass through my tolls just to feed the poor?
Because you're stealing from yourself.
Milo said. He stepped to the edge of the deck, ignoring Seraphine's warning hiss.
I have read your books, Captain. The League paid for river patrols. The patrols were disbanded 6 months ago. Yet you still collect the protection tax.
Vane's smile faded. His hand tightened on the railing.
Insolence will cost you your head. Your head costs less. Look at the ledger, Vane. Look at the gap between your payments and your promises. You hired raiders to clear the water, didn't you? You let them attack your own vessels so you could claim insurance from the crown, then raise the tolls to cover the losses. Seize him. Rope him down. I want his hands bound before I drop him into the slime.
Seraphine lunged forward, pulling a short blade from her belt.
Milo, move. No.
He focused on the red thread tying Vane's contract to the iron chain. It was thick, pulsing with stolen value. I don't need to fight the chain. I need to expose the fraud. Vane signaled his men. Hooks flew from the tack ship, aiming for the brass mercy.
You are a fool, accountant. You think words stop steel? Steel stops when it runs out of purpose.
He reached into the void where only he could see, grasping the invisible thread of Vane's agreement with the League. It felt oily and cold. The League demanded protection. They received theft. That is a breach. Cut them loose. Vane screamed, sensing something shift in the air. The hum of the chain deepened, becoming a shriek. Fire the ballista, shoot the barge. Seraphine slashed at the approaching hook, severing the rope before it could hook the deck.
Milo, the chain is shaking. I have him.
His eyes burned as he pulled on the thread.
Vane, you cannot enforce a toll for protection that was never delivered. The debt is void.
You dare? The red lines binding him to the chain pulsed violently, sending shocks up his arms that made his velvet coat twitch. I am the toll king of the velvet current. I decide who passes and who drowns. Milo stepped closer to the edge of the brass Mercy's prow, rain slicking his hair to his forehead. He did not blink. He kept his hand extended, fingers curled around the invisible thread of Vane's obligation. Vane gestured wildly to his crewman on the tack ship's rail. Cut the rope, drop him. I don't care if he bleeds into the water. I want his skull in my hold. 2 guards leveled their muskets, the flintlocks clicking as they loaded charge. The smell of sulfur mixed with the petrichor of the black rain. Seraphine moved to Milo's side, her sword drawn, but she held back, watching Milo's face for a signal that would tell her whether steel was useful or suicide.
You are bound by the League's charter.
His voice cutting through the drumming rain with unnatural clarity.
Article 4. Protection of river traffic. You received your fee. You did not provide the protection. The raiders you hired? They didn't strike random targets. They struck League-owned barges to inflate your insurance claims. You engineered the loss.
Vane's eyes widened just a fraction. Lies, seditious lies from a starving gutter snipe. Fire, the muskets fired. The shots rang out sharp and sudden against the hollow boom of the river. One ball grazed Milo's shoulder, tearing through his coat and biting into flesh, but he did not flinch. He pulled harder on the thread.
It is not a lie, it is an audit. And I am balancing your books against reality.
The iron chain groaned. The red light within the links turned from a steady hum to a jagged, dissonant shriek. Vane staggered back, clutching his chest as if he had been punched by a ghost. The crowd of guards on the tack ship looked around in confusion, their weapons lowering slightly as the very air seemed to vibrate with the weight of exposed truth. Vane gasped for air, his face pale beneath the crimson velvet. I hold the writ. The crown grants me. The crown granted you permission to tax, Milo interrupted, his voice dropping to a cold, hard register that silenced the nearby wind. The League granted you the duty of protection. You failed the duty, you breached the contract, and in this city, breach is fatal. Seraphine watched the chain. The iron links were beginning to glow white-hot, the magic within them unraveling as the fraud pattern was laid bare for all who could see it. "Milo," she said, her voice low and urgent.
The chain is breaking. But if we let go of this moment, Vane will just raise the tolls again tomorrow. Then we do not let go.
He turned his gaze from Vane to the massive iron links spanning the river. "We take the claim. We seize the authority. Not to rule, but to enforce. You can't seize a captain's writ." Vane shrieked, struggling to stand upright. His crewmen were backing away now, sensing that their leader was no longer in control of the situation.
That is treason. That is justice.
He snapped his fingers. The sound was small, but it echoed like a gavel strike across the entire river. "The League owes restitution to the river settlements for the raiders they hired. You stole their safety. I am collecting on their behalf." A shockwave of red light exploded from Milo's hand, shooting across the gap between the brass mercy and the tax ship. It struck Vane in the chest, not with physical force, but with the weight of absolute obligation. Vane fell to his knees, vomiting bile onto the deck. As the magical bonds around him snapped and dissolved into smoke, the iron chain above them shuddered, then went dark. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. Seraphine sheathed her sword, looking at the now dormant chain with wide eyes. "You broke it, without cutting a single link. I settled it. The debt is paid. The threat is void." He looked up at Vane, who was trembling on the deck of the tax ship, stripped of his magical leverage. "You will release the grain barge behind us. You will mark my passage as cleared by force majeure, and you will ensure that no League officer ever demands a toll from Giltwater again." Vane looked up, his eyes filled with hatred and fear. "If I refuse, then I file."
Then I file a complaint with every settlement from here to the Ash Marches.
His voice steady despite the blood soaking his sleeve.
And I ensure they see the ledger. You will sign the clearance papers. You will mark this transaction as settled by audit, not force.
Vane wiped bile from his lip, his eyes darting toward his crew. The guards were no longer looking at their captain with loyalty. They were looking at him with the wary suspicion of men who realize their commander has been playing a game he cannot win.
If I sign,
I lose my authority. The League will hunt me. The League already hates you.
Stepping off the prow and onto the floating gap between the barge and the ship, her boots splashed in the oily water before she hauled herself up the rope ladder. "You stole their protection money to pay for your own vanity. They don't want you alive, Vane. They want you silent. I'm just giving them a reason to speak." Milo held out a hand. The invisible threads connecting Vane to his writ were frayed, snapping one by one as the fraud pattern dissolved into the black rain. "Give me the seal. Now." Vane hesitated, his fingers gripping the signet ring on his pinky finger. It was heavy gold, engraved with the crest of the Velvet Current Merchant League, a serpent coiled around a coin. "This is treason against my masters." "It is restitution to your victims," Milo corrected. "And if you do not give it to me, I will extract the value directly from your soul." "Do you think the system cares about your employment status? It cares only for balance, and right now, you are in deficit." Vane flinched as a sharp pain gripped his chest, mirroring the shockwave Milo had unleashed moments before. He looked down at his hands. The skin was turning gray, necrotic patches spreading from the joints where the magical bonds had been tied. "What are you doing to me?" Vane screamed, dropping to his knees as he clawed at his chest. His crewmen finally snapped out of their paralysis.
"Captain, what is happening? Is it a curse? It is an audit. Look at him. Look at what happens when you serve a lie."
One of the guards, a young man with a scar across his nose, stepped forward. He looked at Vane's suffering, then at Milo, then at the grain barges bobbing safely in their wake.
"The captain. He said we were protecting the trade lanes. But my brother's boat was burned last month. Who took his goods? The League, and they paid themselves to keep it that way."
The guard lowered his musket. He looked at Vane with pure contempt. "You stole our safety." He reached for the signet ring on his pinky, but his fingers were too stiff to grip it.
Take it,
Her sword tip hovering near Vane's throat.
or I take your hand.
Vane looked up at Milo, tears mixing with the rain on his face.
"Please, I have a family. I have debts of my own. Your debts are none of my concern. Only those of the people you harmed are mine. Sign the paper, or die insolvent."
Vane trembled, then slowly, painfully, untwisted his pinky finger to free the ring. He dropped it onto the wet deck. It landed with a dull thud near Seraphine's boot. Take it. Take everything. Seraphine picked up the ring and held it out to Milo.
What do we do with it? We use it.
He took the ring, feeling its warmth fade into the cold of his own hand. The magical residue clung to it, oily and dark.
We use it to declare Giltwater free. We broadcast the audit results to every barge on the river. Every captain, every tollkeeper, every merchant will see the truth. And then,
Her eyes narrowing.
what happens to us? We just broke the monopoly of the largest merchant league in the region. They won't let this go.
They can try.
He looked at the grain barges behind them, their sails full, their holds heavy with the only thing keeping Giltwater from starvation. But they cannot collect tolls from a city that is no longer part of their ledger. We are off the books, Seraphine. We are free. Vane coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He lay on his side, shivering in the cold rain.
Let her come.
He turned his back on Vane, walking to the edge of the tax ship's rail to look out at the river. The black rain continued to fall, but the air felt different, lighter. The oppressive weight of the debt lines that usually hung over every person and place was gone, at least from this section of the river. The crown can seize my body, but they cannot seize what I have built. Seraphine joined him at the rail, wiping her blade on Seraphine's boot scuffed the wet wood, grinding the signet ring slightly deeper into the deck's grain. She didn't look at Milo. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon where the black rain blurred the line between sky and water. The crown doesn't care about ledgers, she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the relief that should have been there. Irix Thorn knows exactly what you've done. She's watching. And she won't send soldiers to arrest a ghost. Milo stepped closer to the rail, the cold rain soaking through his coat, chilling the blood drying on his shoulder. He could feel the system humming in the back of his mind, quiet now that the immediate threat was neutralized, but active nonetheless. The red lines of obligation had shifted. They were no longer a cage around Giltwater. They were a map, a dangerous one. She thinks if she can't own the debt, she'll own the debtor. But we just severed the link between the river and its masters. She just gave you 10 days of bread, Seraphine countered, turning her head to look at him. Her face was grim, shadows under her eyes from sleepless nights and constant vigilance. But bread doesn't stop an audit. When Thorn arrives, she won't see a liberated city. She'll see a breach of royal contract. She'll declare Giltwater insolvent on the spot. And then she'll seize every stone in this flooded pit. Milo turned away from the water, looking back at the grain barges drifting in their wake. The cargo was secure, but the victory felt hollow, brittle. Let her try, he said.
We have the food. We have the wall repairs starting tomorrow. And now we have a precedent. A precedent of treason.
She spat over the side of the ship, watching the dark liquid mix with the river. You think forgiving debt makes you a hero? It makes you a target. Every noble in the marches will want your head on a spike to show they still respect their contracts. He walked back toward the center of the deck, where Milo Vey lay shivering, his eyes wide and vacant. The former captain stared at nothing, his hands trembling as he tried to grasp at air that no longer held him. We aren't heroes, Seraphine. We're auditors. And this city is underfunded. He knelt beside Vane. The man flinched as Milo approached, curling in on himself like a wounded animal.
Look at me.
His voice was low, devoid of sympathy but full of authority.
You served the League because you believed in their promise of order. You were wrong.
Vane choked out a laugh that sounded like cracking ice.
Order is a lie. Then fix it.
He held out his hand, palm up.
Give me the clearance papers from your chest pocket. The ones for the next 3 months of toll collection. We're going to burn them, all of them. And then we're going to broadcast the truth of your fraud to every settlement along the Velvet Current.
Vane stared at Milo's hand, as if it were a trap. Why would I help you? You ruined me. He leaned in closer, his face inches from Vane's. I liberated you. You're insolvent now. You have nothing left to lose but your life. But if you help me, you become a witness, a living record of the League's crimes. And as long as I breathe, no crown agent will touch you. Vane swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing.
You're bluffing. The Crown doesn't protect criminals. I'm not asking for protection. I'm offering a settlement. You give me the papers. You sign a statement, admitting to embezzlement and hiring raiders. And I make sure Giltwater remembers that you tried to stop us. That's leverage. That's currency.
Seraphine stepped forward, her sword still in her hand, the tip dripping rainwater. "Do it," she said to Vane, "or I cut off your fingers for each day of food you cost us." Vane flinched, his eyes darting to Seraphine's blade, then back to Milo. He slowly reached into his sodden coat, his fingers fumbling with the wax seal on a parchment tube. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. Milo caught it before it hit the deck, unwrapping the wax with practiced ease.
Good.
He pulled out the scroll and unfurled it. The ink was fresh, the seals of the velvet current bright and arrogant against the damp paper. "Now we write the next entry." He looked up at Seraphine.
Get the guards to load the grain onto the shore. Now, every sack. If a single loaf stays on this ship when Thorn's tax cutter arrives, she'll have grounds to confiscate the vessel and arrest us for obstruction. And you?
She holstered her sword, but didn't sheath it fully, keeping her hand near the hilt.
What are you doing? I'm finishing the audit.
He looked down at Vane.
You're going to write a confession. Not just for yourself. For the League. Every name, every bribe, every contract that proves they stole from the river settlements. You'll spell it out, and then we'll use your ship to carry it.
Vane stared at him. Terror. The rain in Giltwater did not wash things clean. It merely pressed the grime deeper into the cobblestones. Milo Vey stood in the shadow of the counting house, his hands stained with ink that smelled of iron and old blood. Above him, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of storms that never broke, only lingered like a debt unpaid. Seraphine Vale stood to his left, her posture rigid, her hand resting on the pommel of a sword that had seen better days. She watched the crowd gathering in the square beyond the gates. They were not rioting yet. They were waiting. The silence of the city was louder than any cheer it had ever raised.
The wall is holding.
Her eyes did not leave the masses pressing against the perimeter.
For now. For how long?
He looked down at his hands.
The Crown didn't just stop paying for the repairs. They stopped caring if they held. They care when it comes to repossessions.
She turned her head slightly, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. They don't care about bricks. They care about collateral. You saw what Irix Thorn read aloud. The entire city is secured debt. We are the interest. Milo closed his eyes for a moment. Emergency notice. Giltwater will be repossessed in 20 days, 11 hours. The text scrolled across his vision, indifferent to his fear.
If we fall into default, the Crown takes everything. Not just the gold, the people. Then we pay.
It was not a question. She stepped closer to him, the rain slicking her dark hair to her forehead. We find the money. We sell what little we have left. We beg the merchants in the upper district. Milo laughed, a dry, hollow sound that was lost in the wind. Beg? You want me to beg the people who are watching us starve so their profits can rise? No, I don't want to pay them. I want to show them they owe us. Show them? Seraphine frowned. Her fingers tightened on her sword hilt.
You have no gold, Milo. You have debts that would sink a fleet. You have promises you cannot keep. I have leverage.
He opened his eyes.
I found the discrepancy. The Crown collected protection taxes for 40 years. They built nothing. They repaired nothing. They sold us safety they never delivered. That is fraud. That is a breach of contract.
Seraphine stared at him. For a second, her skepticism wavered, replaced by a desperate hope she quickly tried to bury.
Fraud? You think the Crown will care about fraud while they prepare to drag us to the gallows? I think the system cares.
He tapped his chest.
And I think that if we can prove the contract is void, if we can prove we are not debtors but victims of a breached agreement, then we aren't collateral. We are creditors.
Creditor? Seraphine let out a short, incredulous laugh. Us? The starving rats in the mud? To whom? To yourself? To the truth, Milo corrected, and to anyone who wants to listen. But first, we need proof. Physical proof. Not just numbers on a page. He looked toward the base of the counting house, where the masonry had begun to crumble from neglect and moisture. The foundations. The original charter is supposed to be there, buried under layers of lies and rot. Seraphine followed his gaze.
The old archives are flooded, drowned since the Great Flood. No one has been down there in centuries. Then it's time to dive.
He turned toward the side entrance of the building, where a gap in the masonry had been hastily patched with rough stones. Help me break through. Seraphine hesitated. The crowd behind her was growing restful. She could feel the tension radiating from them, a coiled spring waiting for a trigger.
If you leave this square, who controls the people? They need something to hold on to. Not just ideas, food, and hope. But mostly food. I'm going to the lower levels. I need you to go to the kitchens. Take whatever grain is left in the emergency stores. Distribute it. Free of charge? Free?
Seraphine's eyes widened.
Milo, that stock lasts us 3 days. If we give it away now, we have nothing for when the crown arrives. If we keep it,
His voice low and urgent.
we are hoarders. When they take us, we die with full bellies and broken spirits. If we give it away, we become providers. We shift the narrative, from victims to leaders. Do it.
Seraphine looked at him, searching for madness in his face. She found only a terrifying clarity. You are playing a dangerous game, Milo Vey. I know, he said, but I'm not playing alone anymore. He walked toward the gap in the wall. Seraphine watched him go, her jaw set. Then she turned to the square. Gather the able-bodied, she shouted, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Who are you to give orders? Seraphine's voice cut through the damp air, sharp and sudden. She stepped into Milo's path, blocking his view of the crumbling masonry. Her hand remained on her sword hilt, but her posture had shifted from rigid defense to active obstruction. You speak of food as if it were a political lever. It is bread. It is life. It is leverage, Milo corrected, stepping around her with deliberate slowness. He pointed an ink-stained finger toward the dark gap in the wall. If we keep it, we are kings waiting for a kingdom that no longer exists. If we share it, we are partners in survival. Which do you prefer to be? Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Rain dripped from her nose, but she did not blink.
And when the grain runs out? When the hunger returns and the crown ships are still above us. Then we use the walls, but first, we prove they were built by liars.
He pushed past her shoulder, the damp wool of his coat brushing against her chainmail. The gap in the counting house smelled of mildew and ancient stone. Beyond it lay a staircase that spiraled down into darkness, swallowed by the floodwaters that had claimed the lower levels decades ago.
Wait.
Her voice echoing off the wet brick.
If you go down there alone, you will drown before you find anything.
Milo paused on the first step. He looked back, his face illuminated only by the gray light of the storm above.
Then send someone who knows how to swim in more than just water. I will come.
She drew her sword, not in threat, but as a tool. The blade caught the dim light, reflecting the red glow of the ledger lines that only Milo could see.
I do not trust your ledgers. But I trust my blade to keep you from falling into the dark. Fine.
He turned and descended. The stairs were slick with algae and decay. Each step crunched under his boots, sending up puffs of stagnant air that smelled of rotting wood and old iron.
But watch your step. The structural integrity is compromised. I watched the ground.
Falling into step behind him. Her boots splashed in shallow puddles that had formed on the stairs. I watched the shadows. You watch your words. They reached the bottom floor. The water here was waist-deep, black, and still. It reflected the faint red lines of Milo's vision, stretching out like veins across the flooded room. In the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, dry and untouched by the flood. On it lay a massive slab of obsidian, gleaming with unnatural oiliness.
Is that it?
Wading through the water toward the dais, she kept her sword ready, sweeping the murky depths around them.
The charter? It is older.
He pulled his coat tighter against the chill. The cold here was not just temperature, it was pressure. The weight of centuries of unpaid obligations pressed against his skin. It is a contract. He approached the obsidian slab. As he drew near, the ledger lines in his vision flared red, burning behind his eyes. Ancient contract found. The text scrolled across his vision, overriding the rain and the dark. Giltwater's founders promised 400 years of tribute to Nymara Ashwing in exchange for protection from the Ash March clans. Nymara? Seraphine stopped at the edge of the dais. She frowned, looking at the carving etched into the black stone. The symbols were jagged, like claws.
The Dragon Mother? They made a pact with her? They stopped paying.
His voice was low, barely audible over the drip of water from the ceiling.
After 40 years. They blamed the clans for the attacks and buried the evidence. They thought they could default on a dragon. Suicide.
She leaned in closer, her breath fogging in the cold air.
Why did no one tell us? Why is this hidden here?
Because the crown wanted to seize the protection for free.
He ran his hand over the obsidian surface. It was warm, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic heat. They claimed the city's debt, but they hid the source of its safety. The Crown Treasury has been living on stolen collateral. Primary debtor, Giltwater Founder's Estate. Secondary beneficiary, Crown Treasury of Aurelian. The system's voice was cold and absolute. Hidden clause found. Dragon may claim the city's living heirs if tribute is not paid for 360 years. Milo pulled his hand back as if burned. 360 years, he whispered. They've been complicit in our slow death for centuries. The water behind them rippled. It was not a fish. It was a shape, vast and heavy, rising from the depths of the chamber floor. Seraphine spun around, her sword raised high.
What is that? I do not know.
He could feel the hostility radiating from the water, a physical weight that pressed against his chest. Hostile entity detected, Nimara Ashwing, but I think she is late. The water drained away instantly, sucked into a vortex in the center of the room. Steam rose from the obsidian slab as the heat intensified. From the darkness behind the dais, two eyes opened. They were gold, vertical slits that burned with ancient intelligence and rage. Nimara stepped out of the shadows, her form shifting from the vague mass of water to the solid, terrifying reality of dragon-blooded royalty. She wore armor made of black scales that drank the dim light, and her tail dragged heavily across the stone floor, leaving deep grooves in the centuries-old dust. The air grew hot, dry, and smelling of sulfur and old blood.
You stare at a debt you cannot comprehend.
Her voice sounding like stones grinding together deep underground.
You read ink on paper while I breathe fire upon your ancestors.
Seraphine kept her sword pointed at the dragon's throat, though her hand trembled slightly.
We are not your subjects. We never signed your book. Obligation does not require a signature.
Taking a step forward. The water around her feet hissed as it evaporated. It requires silence and survival. Your forebears took the silence. They kept the peace while they feasted on the tribute I never received. Now the crown comes to take what is left, and I come to take what was promised. Milo watched the red lines in his vision connect Nimara to the obsidian slab, then stretch up through the ceiling, piercing the rock and soil until they vanished into the gray sky above. The connection was thick, pulsating with compound interest that had been accruing for 400 years, usurious interest detected. The system highlighted the Crown Treasury's share in a bright, accusing yellow.
The crown took the tribute.
His voice steady despite the heat radiating from the dragon.
They diverted it to the war coffers. They broke the contract first.
Nimara tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing.
The crown is a thief and a fool. Does the lion care who stole its bone? It eats the meat of the weak regardless of the thief's name. That is where you are wrong.
He stepped between Seraphine and the dragon, his small human frame dwarfed by her presence.
A contract has parties. If one party defaults, the obligation does not vanish. It shifts. And if the primary beneficiary acts in bad faith, the secondary claims become voidable.
Nimara let out a low growl that vibrated in Milo's ribs.
You speak of law while standing in my lair? You think your words can bind a dragon?
My words describe what is already written.
He gestured to the obsidian slab.
Look at the stone, Nimara Ashwing. The founders promised protection from the Ash March clans in exchange for tribute. But who is the Ash March clan? Are you not one of them? Or are you their ruler?
Nimara's eyes flared brighter.
I am the Ash Wing. I am the storm that breaks their walls. Do not mistake my restraint for weakness, little accountant. Restraint is a luxury, default is a death sentence. You have 360 years of unpaid tribute. The crown took it all. They left you with nothing but resentment and a city full of people who forgot their own history.
Seraphine lowered her sword an inch, listening intently. She understood enough to know that Milo was negotiating for their lives.
What do you want then? Blood?
A harsh barking sound.
Blood is cheap. I want order. I want the truth recorded in the ledger of the world. If the crown claims this city as collateral, they claim my tribute. That is theft from me.
Milo nodded slowly. Exactly. And theft creates enemies. Enemies create wars. Wars destroy ledgers. He turned back to the obsidian slab, tracing a finger along the carved lines. The founders failed you. The crown stole from you. But Giltwater, as it stands now, owes nothing to either of you directly. The debt belongs to the founder's estate, which is insolvent. Nimara leaned down, her snout inches from Milo's face. He could feel the heat of her breath scorching his eyebrows.
Insolvent estates are often absorbed by creditors. What happens to the assets? The assets become collateral.
He met her gaze without flinching.
But there is a loophole. If the original debtor's estate is dissolved, and the beneficiary accepts a new contract from the current holders of the land, the old obligation is settled.
Namara pulled back, smoke curling from her nostrils.
You propose to rewrite history? I propose to settle the account.
He looked at Seraphine, then back to Naimara.
Giltwater will pay its tribute. Not in gold, not in blood, but in service. In protection against the crown, we become your vassals, freely and legally, rather than victims of a silent default.
Seraphine's eyes widened.
Milo, if we pledge loyalty to a dragon, we are no longer free citizens. We are alive.
Not breaking eye contact with Naimara.
And we keep the city intact. The crown will not seize Giltwater if it is under the direct protection of an Ash March warlord. They will fear the war more than they covet the debt.
Naimara studied him for a long moment. The heat in the room seemed to pulse in time with her breathing. Istim alert. Negotiation in progress. Risk assessment. High.
You offer me a leash? I offer you a contract.
One where you get your tribute, and we get our survival, and the crown gets nothing but an empty claim. And if I refuse?
Naimara's eyes narrowed, the golden slits contracting to pinpricks of lethal light. You think I am some merchant to be haggled with over scraps of grain and copper coins? I am fire, I am ash. I do not sign leases. Seraphine shifted her weight, her knuckles white on the hilt of her sword. He is trying to save us, dragon. He is offering you a win when you have none left. I hear no win, Naimara said. She took another step forward, the stone floor cracking beneath her scaled foot. I hear theft. I hear 4 centuries of silence where tribute should have been. And now you come to me with ink and parchment, expecting me to forgive a debt that has grown fat on your fear? Milo did not flinch. He kept his hands open, palms up, a gesture of transparency that felt absurdly small against the towering figure of the dragon-blooded ruler. The crown stole the tribute, Milo said. They broke the chain first. They took what was yours and gave you nothing but neglect. If I pay you in gold, it is stolen money. If I pay you in blood, it is the blood of innocent citizens who owe no debt to your house. Then why should I not take the city anyway? Naimara snapped. Her jaw unhinged slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth that glowed with an internal heat. If the crown claims Giltwater as collateral, they strip it bare. They will leave nothing for me but a husk. It is in my interest to burn what the crown cannot have. Seraphine stepped sideways, putting herself between Milo and the dragon's sudden lunge. You don't want a husk, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her legs. You want your respect. You want the clans to know that Naimara Ashwing was not tricked, not cheated, not ignored for 400 years. Naimara paused, the smoke from her nostrils swirling into dense black clouds. She looked at Seraphine, then at Milo. Respect is earned in war, little guard, not in accounting tables. He pointed to the obsidian slab, and debt requires a living debtor. If you burn the city, you extinguish the source of the obligation. You become a monster who devours her own sustenance. Is that the legacy you wish to leave? A pile of ash and a default? Naimara hissed, a sound like steam escaping a high-pressure valve. She turned away, pacing along the edge of the dais. Her tail swept across the floor, knocking over piles of rotting scrolls that Milo had not noticed until now. The crown has other claims, she said, her back to them. They hold titles to the river trade. They hold the rights to the salt mines. If I claim Giltwater, I declare war on Aurelian. Milo saw the red ledger lines shift in his vision. The connection to the crown treasury pulsed aggressively, a bright red warning that bordered on painful. He focused on it, trying to parse the structure of the obligation. The crown's claim is based on protection, Milo said. But they never protected you. They stole your tribute to fund their own wars. Their protection was a lie sold to the founders, and you know it. Naimara stopped pacing. She turned slowly, her gaze locking onto Milo's eyes. How do you know what I know? He pulled up the system interface in his mind, dragging the relevant clauses into view for himself. The primary debtor is the founder's estate. They defaulted on the tribute in exchange for protection that was never delivered. The secondary beneficiary, the crown, breached the contract by diverting funds meant for your security. Under Dominion law, a breached contract can be voided or renegotiated. Seraphine lowered her sword slightly, confusion etching her face. Renegotiated? With a dragon? With an interested party, Milo corrected. He looked back at Nimara. You are owed 400 years of tribute. The crown owes you for the diversion of those funds. Giltwater, as it stands today, owes nothing, because the original contract was nullified by breach. But I am offering you a settlement. We acknowledge your claim. We pay the tribute now, through service, not gold. In exchange, you recognize Giltwater as a free ledger, not crown property, not crown collateral, your protected territory. Nimara laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. I think you care about leverage, Milo said. He stepped closer, ignoring the heat radiating from her scales. If the crown repossesses Giltwater, they take the river trade rights, they take the salt mines, they strip the city to pay their debts to other nobles. You get nothing but a burnt city and angry mercenaries looking for new employment. But if you sign this contract, you gain a permanent ally on the border. You gain access to our labor, our goods, and our loyalty. And you humiliate the crown by taking what they claimed was theirs without firing a single arrow. Nimara stared at him. The silence stretched, heavy and thick with the smell of ozone and sulfur. You ask me to trust an insolvent city, Nimara said finally. You ask me. The rain in Giltwater did not wash things clean. It only made the grime slicker, turning the cobblestones of the execution square into a treacherous slide for boots that knew they were walking on borrowed time. Milo Vey stood at the edge of the crowd, his hands deep in the pockets of a coat that had seen better decades, watching Irix Thorn approach with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the universe, bent to his tax codes. The royal assessor wore a coat of dry-cleaned wool that repelled the storm, a stark contrast to Milo's sodden, heavy fabric. Behind Irix marched 6 royal soldiers, their halberds glinting under the gray sky, their faces masked not just by rain, but by the dull compliance of men who had forgotten why they held weapons in the first place. Irix stopped 10 paces from Milo, the distance measured with the precision of a ledger line. He did not look at the crowd, nor at the glowing red chains of debt that stretched invisibly from every citizen's neck to the distant horizon where the crown's tax ship waited like a shark circling a wounded seal. He looked only at Milo, his eyes cold and calculating.
You look thin.
Tilting his head slightly as if inspecting a piece of damaged property. The siege has taken its toll on your constitution, or perhaps just on your patience. Milo did not blink. He kept his voice low, matching the rhythm of the rain falling against the stone walls that had failed to protect them for years. I look alive. That is more than most can say this morning. You have come to collect, Irix, or have you finally run out of paper and need blood to balance the books? Irix smiled, a thin, cruel stretching of lips that showed no warmth. Paper is permanent. Blood is messy and unnecessary. The crown has decided that Giltwater is insolvent, not just in coin but in spirit. Your people have defaulted on their loyalty. My order is simple. Surrender the city's leadership to the royal garrison. We will restructure your population, indenture those who cannot pay, execute those who refuse. A murmur rippled through the crowd behind Milo, heads bowed, shoulders hunched against the cold and the fear. But Milo turned his head just enough to see them, the debt lines pulsing brighter around their throats, a web of crimson light binding them to a master that had long since stopped providing protection in exchange for tribute. Restructure, Milo repeated, tasting the word like ash. You mean enslave? You mean starve the ones who survive so they can work off a debt that was never theirs to begin with? Did you check the ledger, Irix? Did you notice that the crown collected protection taxes for the wall it let crumble? Irix's smile faded. His hand moved to the seal at his belt, a gesture of irritation rather than preparation.
The wall is irrelevant. The debt is absolute. You are a creditor in name only, Milo Vey. You manage chaos for the crown. Do not mistake your temporary authority for ownership. Authority is granted by consent.
Stepping forward, the rain sizzled against his skin, as if the air itself were charged with the weight of the coming confrontation.
And consent can be revoked, especially when the creditor breaches the contract.
A sharp, barking sound that echoed off the wet stone.
You are delusional. You think you can audit a kingdom? You are one man in a coat of mud.
I am the only one here who sees the truth.
His voice hardening.
And the truth is that you owe us more than we owe you. But before we settle that account, There is another party involved.
Irix frowned, glancing past Milo toward the horizon.
What other party? There is no one left in this city but rats and debtors. There is, and she is waiting to collect her share.
The ground trembled, a low rumble that shook the rain from the eaves of the surrounding buildings. From the east, where the Ash March clans held their territory, a shadow detached itself from the storm clouds. It was not a cloud, nor smoke. It was wings, vast and leathery, blotting out the gray light. The crowd gasped, stepping back in unison, pressing themselves against the walls of the square. Irix's eyes widened, just for a moment, before he forced his composure back into place. A dragon, he whispered, the word carrying more fear than any shout could.
You brought a dragon to the execution square? I did not bring her. She came because the crown defaulted on her tribute. And now, so do you.
Namara Ashwing descended from the sky, landing with a force that cracked the cobblestones beneath her talons. She was massive, her scales the color of dried blood and ash, her eyes burning with ancient fury. She did not speak, she simply looked at Irix, then at Milo, then at the soldiers who were now visibly trembling, their halberds shaking in their grip. Irix swallowed hard, his voice rising an octave as he tried to maintain his dominance.
This is an act of war. Vey, you cannot invoke her claim on a city under royal seizure. I am invoking it.
Stepping onto the raised platform that had once held the executioner's gallows, he looked up at Nymara, meeting her gaze without flinching. And I am offering you a settlement, a chance to take what is owed without burning the house down. Her voice was not a sound, but a pressure in the skull, a resonance that vibrated in the teeth of everyone in the square.
You speak of settlements to a creature who eats oaths? I speak of them to a creditor.
His eyes locked on hers.
And you are being cheated.
Irix stepped forward, his boots splashing in the runoff water. He tried to insert himself between Milo and the dragon, a futile gesture of bureaucratic obstruction. This is illegal. You cannot negotiate with an apex predator as if she were a municipal bond. Nymara's tail lashed out, cracking the air like a whip. The sound was deafening, causing 3 soldiers to drop their halberds. She did not strike Irix. She merely pointed her snout at him, her nostrils flaring with smoke.
You smell of fear and old paper, little assayer. Do you think your laws bind me? They bind the crown.
Though his voice wavered.
And the crown holds your contract. The crown holds a lie.
Milo interjected. He turned back to Nymara, ignoring the assessor's sputtering indignation. I have audited the ledger, Nymara. The crown has collected protection taxes from the Ash March clans for 10 years. But they never sent a soldier. They never fixed the breaches in the frontier. They kept the gold and let you bleed. Nymara tilted her head, the movement slow and deliberate.
And what do you propose, accountant? I propose a transfer of liability.
He raised his hand, and the glowing red lines that connected Nymara to the distant tax ship shifted. They twisted, coiling tighter around Irix's seals before snapping toward the horizon where the royal fleet waited in the harbor. Giltwater acknowledges your claim. We will restore lawful tribute through grain, labor, and shared frontier defense, but we will no longer pay for the privilege of being ignored. Irix grabbed Milo's arm, his fingers digging into the wet wool of his sleeve.
You are insane. If you redirect her claim to the treasury, the crown will seize everything. The city will be liquidated. Then let them try.
Shaking off his hand, he looked up at Nymara again.
The debt is real, the collateral is valid. But the debtor has defaulted on service. You have a right to repossess the entity that owes you. And that entity is the crown treasury for allowing this fraud to persist.
Nymara exhaled, a plume of steam rolling over the square. The crowd held its breath, standing frozen in the rain.
You ask me to ignore a city that has starved my scouts? To turn my eyes from the people who sold their children for bread? Look at the lines.
His voice cutting through the silence. He pointed to the air above Irix's head. The red ledger lines were no longer just abstract data. They were tangible ropes of light, thick and heavy, binding the royal assessor to the concept of order itself. Irix is not your debtor. He is a middleman, a thief who stole your due to feed his own hierarchy. You can burn this square and collect nothing but ash, or you can let me show you where the real money is. Irix's face went pale.
This is witchcraft. This is a violation of the Sovereign Audit Act. It is economics, and it is final. Do we have an accord, Nymara?
Nymara looked at Irix, then at the soldiers who were now lowering their weapons in confusion. She looked at the citizens of Giltwater, shivering and afraid. Then she looked at the horizon, where the royal ships sat helpless against the storm. Vengeance is sweet, Nymara rumbled, but survival is sweeter. I will take my tribute from the source that hoarded it. The people of Giltwater are temporarily exempt. The words hung in the air, heavier than the rain. Milo nodded once. Then let us write it down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a quill and a scrap of parchment, the founder's contract. He had recovered from the burned counting house. He held it up. The paper glowed as Nimra's shadow fell over it. The ink began to move, rewriting itself in real time, binding the dragon's will to the city's survival. Irix lunged for the paper. No, you cannot. The contract lashed out like a whip of light, wrapping around Irix's wrist. He screamed as the royal seals on his belt flared with angry red energy, burning his skin. Through the leather gloves, the system recognized the shift. The ledger lines snapped from the citizens' throats and reattached to the massive ship-shaped entity hovering above the harbor. The crown treasury was now the debtor, and it was insolvent. The soldiers looked at each other. Above their heads, new lines appeared, thin, fragile strands connecting them to the royal coffers. The numbers were negative. They had not been paid in 6 months. The realization hit them like a physical blow. One by one, they lowered their halberds completely. Why are we fighting? One soldier asked, his voice cracking. I haven't seen silver since winter. Because your officer told you hunger was loyalty, another said, dropping his helmet into the puddle. Irix stared at his burning wrist, then at Milo, his eyes wide with horror. You cannot invoice a kingdom. Milo turned his back on Irix, who was still clutching his scorched wrist, and faced Nymara. He did not bow. He balanced the scales.
The terms are simple.
His voice carrying over the quieting square without needing to shout. You hold the claim against the treasury. We hold the claim against the crown's negligence. The debt transfers at noon. Nymara shifted her weight, the cobblestones grinding beneath her talons. Smoke curled from her nostrils, smelling of sulfur and old blood. And what do I receive in exchange for this mercy? She asked. Her voice was a low thrum that made the rain sizzle on her scales.
Survival. Giltwater will not burn. The people will live to work the fields you need for your tribute. But they will not serve a corrupt crown. They will serve you, Nymara Ashwing, through the contract I am drafting now.
Irix scrambled up, his face contorted in rage and pain. He ignored his wound, stepping between Milo and the dragon.
She cannot do that. The crown holds sovereign immunity on all territorial claims. You are violating the Charter of Succession. The Charter applies to kings.
Pulling a fresh sheet of parchment from his satchel, the air around him shimmered as the system's invisible machinery whirred, translating intent into binding law. It does not apply to fraud. Nymara narrowed her eyes, focusing on Irix.
You speak much for a man who smells of fear. Why do you protect them? I protect order.
His voice cracking under the pressure of the dragon's gaze.
Without hierarchy, there is only chaos. Without the crown, Giltwater collapses into barbarism within a month. Look at them.
He gestured wildly at the crowd of shivering citizens. They are debtors. They have no worth beyond what the crown assigns to them. A woman in the front row, her clothes ragged and soaked through, stepped forward. She held a bundle of dried herbs close to her chest. He assigned us death, she said. Her voice was thin but clear. We owe him nothing. Order is not worth this price, another voice cried out from the back. A young man with ink-stained fingers raised his fist. We worked the walls for free. We fed the garrison, and they taxed us for breathing. Irix's eyes darted between the speakers, his composure shattering. Silence. You are insolvent subjects. Your voices have no weight in a court of law. Milo dipped his quill into an inkwell that appeared in his hand, formed by condensation and magic. The nib scratched against the parchment, the sound loud in the sudden silence of the square.
Their voices have all the weight they need, because I am their auditor. And auditors speak for the numbers.
Nymara leaned closer to Milo. Her eye, a vertical slit of molten gold, filled his vision. The crown has failed its duty, she rumbled. It took the tribute and gave nothing. It is inefficient. He held up the parchment. The ink was glowing, binding itself to the air around them. Giltwater acknowledges your claim, But we redirect it. We offer grain instead of gold. We offer labor instead of blood. And we offer you a direct line to the Treasury's reserves, bypassing the assessor entirely. Irix lunged for the parchment, his hand outstretched. Stop! I order you, a jet of fire, no larger than a torch but hot enough to melt stone, erupted from Nymara's maw. It stopped inches from Irix's face, warming his skin and singeing his eyebrows. He froze, his hand trembling in the air.
Do not touch my contract, or I will consider it a declaration of war.
Irix fell back, gasping, his face pale with shock. I am breaking your monopoly, Milo corrected. He turned to the crowd, raising the glowing parchment high. The red lines that had once connected every citizen to their misery were now visible to him alone, but he could feel their weight lifting. Citizens of Giltwater, the Crown has defaulted. Your debts to them are nullified by breach of service, but your debt to Nymara Ashwing is real, and we have negotiated a new terms. Do you accept? Nymara exhaled, the fire fading. She looked at Irix, who was cowering behind a pillar, then at the citizens, who were watching her with a mixture of hope and terror. I accept, she said.
But know this, Vey. If the grain is late, or the labor insufficient, I will not ask for penalties. I will take what I want, noted.
He signed the parchment with a flourish. The ink flared bright gold, and the document shot upward, dissolving into light that swirled around Nymara's horns before vanishing into the storm clouds above. A chime resonated in Milo's mind, clear and definitive. System alert, new asset acquired. Ash March defensive pact established. Enemy morale reduced. Royal garrison wage default exposed. Faction rank updated. Giltwater reclassified as Free Ledger of Giltwater. The sky cracked open. Lightning struck the harbor, illuminating the royal ships. The massive tax vessel that had loomed over the city for months began to list. The tax ship groaned, its hull shuddering as if the weight of the unpaid wages had physically anchored it to the seabed. The red ledger lines stretching from the vessel's masts to the sky pulsed with a violent, erratic rhythm. Irix scrambled to his feet, brushing mud and blood from his pristine tunic. He pointed a shaking finger at Milo.
You think you've won? You've merely declared bankruptcy on your own soul.
Milo did not look up from the ledger in his hands. He tapped the page, causing the ink to swirl and form new columns. On the contrary, the Crown is consuming its own equity. Look at the balance sheet. He thrust the ledger toward Irix. Your soldiers are unpaid mercenaries holding rifles on a collapsing foundation. Their loyalty was purchased with silver that no longer exists. They are not your soldiers anymore, Irix. They are debtors standing in the rain. A soldier near the back dropped his halberd. The clang of steel against wet cobblestone echoed like a gavel strike. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Milo. What do we do? He asked. The captain is gone. The orders are gone. What's left to take? Milo met the soldier's gaze. You have a choice. You can remain collateral for a crown that has defaulted, or you can become assets in a new economy. Irix spat on the ground.
I am trading a creditor who takes everything for a partner who takes only what is owed, and I ensure that the partner pays for her supplies up front, unlike your crown, which owes its armies 6 months of back pay.
Nymara shifted her bulk, the smoke from her nostrils billowing around Irix like a suffocating fog. I do not require the service of cowards, she rumbled, her voice vibrating in Milo's chest.
But I will accept the grain and the labor. The humans may stay, provided they understand the new terms.
Irix laughed, a harsh, brittle sound.
There is no God King.
Closing the ledger with a snap.
Only ledgers, and yours are empty.
Irix lunged at Milo, drawing a dagger from his belt. You arrogant accountant, I will carve your debt into your skin. Nymara's tail swept across the square. The stone cracked, sending a shockwave that knocked Irix off his feet. He landed hard in a puddle, gasping for breath.
Do not touch him.
Her golden eye, narrowing to a slit.
He is under my protection now. His life belongs to the pack.
Irix scrambled backward, pressing himself against the wall of the counting house.
Let them come.
He walked toward the edge of the square, where the citizens were gathering. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with tension. He looked out at the crowd, seeing the red lines of debt that still clung to some of them, old habits, old fears and obligations, that hadn't yet been cleared. They will find no collateral here. We are insolvent. A woman in the front row stepped forward. She held a basket of apples, bruised but edible. "What do we do now?" she asked. "The walls are broken, the ships are sinking. Who feeds us tomorrow?" Milo turned to her. "You feed yourselves, and you build the walls back up, because the crown won't pay for it. But Nymara will pay you for your labor, in food and safety." He looked at Nymara. "Is that an offer you can honor?" Nymara lowered her head, bringing her eye level with Milo's.
I have plenty of grain in the marshes, and I have no use for gold that tarnishes my scales. But I require structure. Order. Can you provide it? I provided it today. Tomorrow, you'll see if I can keep it.
He turned back to Irix.
You can leave. Or you can stay and work off your own debts. Your wage was already in arrears. It seems fitting that you earn your next meal by breaking stones for the new wall.
Irix stared at him, his face pale with rage. "I am an auditor," Milo corrected, "and I am balancing the books. For the first time in years they balance." He walked past Irix, stepping over the puddle where the royal assessor lay shivering. He joined the woman with the apples. She offered him one. He took it. It was heavy and cold. "Welcome to the free ledger," he said. The crowd began to move, not in panic, but in purpose. People started gathering the halberds dropped by the soldiers. Others began to form lines for ration distribution. The chaos of the execution square was dissolving into the organized hum of a community rebuilding itself. Milo took a bite of the apple. It was tart and sharp. He watched Nymara turn and fly toward the horizon, her wings beating against the storm clouds. The red lines connecting the citizens to the crown were fading, replaced by thin golden threads connecting them to the dragon. He looked down at his. The rain did not fall so much as it hammered, a relentless sheet-white curtain that turned Giltwater's streets into churning brown rivers. The temple of the choir of empty bowls sat on the highest hill, its stone throat wide open to swallow the storm. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet wool, rotting grain, and the coppery tang of blood drying on floorboards. Mother Sable stood on the dais, her white robes stained with the mud of the lower wards. She held a single, bruised apple in one hand, lifting it to the light as if it were a relic. Around her, 50 families huddled on damp straw, their eyes hollowed out by months of rationing and the crown's silent threat.
The hunger is not a punishment.
Mother Sable said, her voice carrying over the drumming rain.
It is a purging. The crown starves you to break your spirit. We offer you strength, not tomorrow, today.
She lowered the apple, her gaze sweeping over the shivering crowd. 10 years of food, enough to raise your children fat and strong, enough to forget the taste of ash. All we ask is a guarantee of loyalty, a future bound to the choir's care. Sign the ledger. Name your children. Take the grain. A man in the front row, his face gaunt enough to reveal the bones beneath, stepped forward. He held out a trembling hand. "If I sign, do they eat tonight?" Mother Sable smiled, a gentle, eerie expression that did not reach her eyes. "They eat when you bind them. The system recognizes commitment before it recognizes need. That is how mercy works." The man's wife gripped his arm. "We cannot give them away, Jory, even for bread." Jory looked at the apple, then at the dark corners of the temple where cult guards watched with bored indifference. He looked back at his children, huddled under a tattered blanket. "Bread is real," he whispered. "The rest can wait." He took the pen. His hand shook as he touched it to the parchment. Milo Vey stood in the shadows of the entrance arch, watching the red ledger lines flare in his vision. They stretched from Jory's chest, thick and ugly, binding him to a warehouse miles away, then up to a royal seal that pulsed with cold malice. The food was not charity. It was bait. He could feel the weight of the contract forming, the legal machinery grinding down on the desperation of the poor. If he intervened now, if he simply shouted fraud, the system would dismiss him. Consensual debt was harder to break than involuntary. He needed proof of coercion. He needed to trace the line. Seraphine Vale stood beside him, her sword drawn, rain streaming from her cap. Her knuckles were white around the hilt. "I can cut them down," she said, "before the pen touches paper, before the contract seals." Milo shook his head.
If you kill the guard, she becomes a martyr. The system rewards violence with debt. We need to break the contract from within. I'm going in. You're insane. You'll be marked as a bidder. You'll sign your own soul away.
I have to be seen as part of the transaction to see the books.
He adjusted his collar, stepping out of the shadow.
Hold the line, Seraphine. If I don't come out in 10 minutes, burn the ledger. Don't save me. Save the families.
He walked toward the dais. The rain soaked his coat instantly, heavy and cold. Every step felt like walking into a trap he had helped design. Mother Sable turned as he approached, her eyes narrowing slightly at the unfamiliar face in her sea of broken people. "Another seeker of salvation?" she asked, her voice smooth as oil. "We are almost full." Mother Sable gestured to the table where Jory was signing. "Come closer, then. See the truth of our charity." Milo stepped up. The moment his hand hovered over the second blank line on the ledger, the world shifted. The red lines in his vision exploded outward, connecting him to every other signer, spiraling up into the sky like vines seeking a sun that wasn't there. He saw the warehouse receipts. He saw the Crown's tax ship diverting grain meant for the orphanages. He saw the deliberate famine engineered by the Crown to force enrollment in their protection programs. The system's voice echoed in his skull, cold and detached. Predatory contract detected, consent compromised by manufactured famine, evidence acquired, Crown grain diversion records. Milo looked up at Mother Sable, who was watching him with predatory anticipation. She thought she had won another soul. She thought he was just another desperate fool.
You're starving them yourself.
His voice steady despite the shaking of his hands.
Then selling the cure.
Mother Sable's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I see the receipts," Milo continued, his eyes glowing faintly as he manipulated the visible threads of debt in his mind. "And I see that you have no authority to collect on them. The Crown breached the wall repair contract first. Their collateral is invalid. The temple went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Mother Sable's face hardened.
You think you can unwrite what is signed? I think.
Pulling a quill from his pocket, Milo Vey held the quill like. Mother Sable's smile froze. Her eyes darted to the ledger, then back to Milo. "The Crown demands its due. We merely facilitate the payment." "Facilitate?" Milo laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. He tapped the quill against the wet wood of the table. "You call starvation facilitation? I see the lines, Sable. The grain is sitting in Vault 4 under the old mint. It's Crown property, held in breach of the wall repair accords. You can't sell what you don't have title to." A murmur rippled through the crowd behind him. Jory froze, the pen hovering over the paper,
He knows?
his voice cracking.
I see everything that owes.
Milo said without looking back. He turned to Mother Sable again.
And you? Are you a creditor or a thief?
"I am the choir of empty bowls," she replied, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously soft. "We are the ones who ensure the hungry do not die before they can serve." Seraphine's voice came from the doorway, ragged and sharp. "Milo, they're breaking in!" The stone doors groaned, wood splintered, cult guards were ramming them with iron-shod beams. Blood sprayed across Seraphine's cheek as she held her ground against the wood, her sword raised but useless against a barricade.
Let them in.
Mother Sable said calmly. She leaned forward, her face inches from Milo's.
Sign the line, auditor. Or do you fear your own ledger?
I don't fear it.
He dropped the quill into the inkwell. It sank with a soft plop.
I'm auditing you.
He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. The red lines connecting him to the warehouse didn't just glow. They burned. He traced them backward, past the cult's symbol, past the Crown's seal, straight to the source, the royal tax ship anchored in the river mist, miles away. The debt was real, but the collateral? The grain? It was tied to a wall that hadn't been repaired since Act 1.
The Crown owns the grain, but they lost the right to collect when they let the western wall crumble into the slums. The lien is void. You're selling stolen goods in a bankrupt court.
Mother Sable's eyes widened. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across her face.
You cannot void consent. I'm not voiding consent.
He opened his eyes. They were glowing white now, the system's interface overlaying his vision. "I'm enforcing the breach." He slammed his hand onto the ledger. Not on Jory's paper, on the dais itself. The wood groaned beneath his palm. System notification. Creditor breach detected. Royal lien nullified. Reversion to primary asset holder. Giltwater Common Trust. The air in the temple shifted. The red lines connecting the families to the warehouse snapped, one by one, like cut guitar strings. A shockwave of silence hit Milo's skull. The hunger in the room didn't vanish, but the chains holding it tightened around a different throat. Mother Sable gasped, clutching her chest as if struck.
What have you done? I returned the collateral.
He looked at Jory.
The grain is yours. It's been sitting in Vault 4 for 3 months, waiting for you to sign away your children so the crown could keep the title. You didn't buy food, Jory. You bought a mortgage on your kids' lives from a landlord who doesn't own the building.
Jory dropped the pen. He looked at his wife, then at the empty space where the ledger's glow had just died.
It's gone? The contract is dead.
He stepped back from the dais, turning to face the cultists who were now pouring through the shattered doors. But they stopped. They looked at their hands, then at Mother Sable, confusion rippling across their faces like water over stone. The authority that bound them, the promise of divine purpose, had just evaporated because the asset backing it was gone. Seraphine kicked the door shut behind her and barred it with a heavy oak beam. She leaned against it, breathing hard. "They're confused," she said. "Good. Keep them confused." Mother Sable stood trembling on the dais. Her robes were torn by the wind from the broken doors. "You think this saves them?" She hissed. "The hunger remains. The rain remains. You have given them nothing but hope, and hope does not fill a belly." Milo looked at her. He felt the weight of the system pressing against his mind, offering him a new path. A dark, easy path. System notification. Predatory contract detected. Consent compromised by manufactured famine. Evidence acquired. Crown grain diversion records. Settlement reversed. 63 child indentures voided. Dark collection available. Convert cult members into compelled labor. Creditors' hunger. 12%. 19%. The numbers glowed in his vision. 19%. The hunger was rising. He could take them. All of them. Force the grain out by seizing their bodies as assets to pay for the damage. The crown had done. It would be easy. It would be efficient. The system offered it like a gift. Seraphine kicked the oak beam tighter against the splintering wood. "Milo, look at me." Milo kept his eyes on the glowing numbers floating in his retina. "I see them, Seraphine. I can see the liability. It's a trap," she spat, wiping blood from her eyebrow with the back of her gauntlet. "It's always a trap when they offer you power. You take it. You become them." He turned his head slowly towards Seraphine. His face was pale, drained by the psychic strain of holding the ledger open. "The crown broke the wall. The grain is sitting in Vault 4, rotting or waiting. If I don't act, the system defaults to the nearest asset. That's you. That's the crowd." Mother Sable stepped down from the dais, her bare feet silent on the wet stone. She stopped 3 paces from Milo, unafraid of the system's glare that only he could see. "You feel it, don't you? The temptation to make them serve." He didn't look at her. He looked at the red line connecting the cultists to the warehouse. It was thick, pulsing with stolen authority. "I can seize it. I can turn their bodies into labor contracts. I can force them to dig until their hands bleed, and the grain will be ours within the hour. No more hunger. No more waiting." Seraphine drew her sword, the steel ringing in the sudden silence. She pointed it at Mother Sable, but her eyes remained locked on Milo. "Put it away, Milo. You just saved 63 kids from chains. Don't forge new ones for their parents." His voice was flat, mechanical.
I'm balancing.
"The crown owes the city 40,000 bushels of grain. They have no money to pay. Their credit is insolvent. If I take the cultists as collateral, the system accepts it."
The debt is cleared. The city eats. The city pays with their souls.
Her knuckles were white on the hilt of her sword.
That's what you did in the counting house, isn't it? You trade lives for survival. You just call it accounting now.
Mother Sable smiled. It was a terrible, pitying smile. "The auditor is hungry, Captain. He sees a solution that requires no begging, no negotiation, no mercy. He sees a straight line from starvation to fullness. And it looks so clean." Milo closed his eyes for a second. The image of the warehouse receipts burned behind his eyelids. 63 families saved by voiding their consent, but the grain remained locked in Vault 4, protected by crown seals that only an auditor could break. If he didn't seize the cultists, the grain stayed trapped until he found another way to break the seal. Another way that might take weeks. Weeks of hunger. Weeks of death.
I can do it.
He opened his eyes. They were no longer white. They were red.
It's efficient. It's fair. The cult created the famine. They should pay the price.
Seraphine took a step forward, raising her voice over the drumming rain outside. Creditors' hunger, 19%. The number ticked up to 20% as he hesitated. The pressure in his skull increased. It wasn't just logic anymore. It was a physical need, a gnawing emptiness in his gut that mirrored the city's own hunger.
If I don't, the system interprets my hesitation as weakness. It will start collecting from the weakest link. It will take Seraphine first. Then Jory. Then the children.
Seraphine lowered her sword an inch, her expression hardening. Let it try. I'd rather die free than live as a slave to your ledgers. Mother Sable clapped her hands softly. The sound echoed like a bone snapping. Then choose, auditor. Do you want to be a savior, or do you want to be a winner? Milo looked at the cultists shuffling in the doorway, confused and powerless without their directive. He looked at Seraphine, standing alone against the door. He looked at Mother Sable, waiting for him to slip.
I don't want to be any of you.
He reached out with his mind, not to seize, but to unravel. He grabbed the red line connecting the cultists to the warehouse and pulled it toward the void he had opened in the ledger. Wait. Mother Sable shrieked, her composure cracking.
You cannot unmake the collateral. The grain will remain locked. It's not collateral anymore.
He focused on the crown's seal on the warehouse receipts. With a mental twist of his wrist, he tore the lien apart. Its free assets, unassigned. The red lines didn't snap this time. They dissolved. The warehouse vaults unlocked with a sound that felt like a sigh across the city. The grain wasn't seized, it was released. System notification, asset released, Vault 4 grain stocks. Status, unrestricted distribution. Creditors' hunger, 19%, 0%. Warning, authority void. No compensation received. The pressure in Milo's head vanished, leaving him dizzy, and Milo's knees buckled. He caught himself on the edge of the dais, his fingers slipping on the wet stone. The silence in the temple was absolute, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain against the roof and the heavy breathing of Seraphine at the door. Seraphine kept her sword raised, watching him with narrowed eyes. "But you look like you're about to pass out." Milo wiped sweat from his forehead. His vision was clearing, but the numbers were still there, faintly in the periphery. They had dropped. The hunger was gone, for now.
It's not over.
His voice was raspy, dry as parchment.
The crown didn't lose the grain. They just stopped holding it hostage.
Mother Sable stared at him, her face pale. Her hands trembled at her sides. She asked. Her voice was small now, stripped of its cultish resonance. Milo straightened up. He felt weak. But the system's pressure was gone. The immediate threat had passed, but the underlying tension remained.
I'm not trying to stop desire.
He looked at the crowd of cultists who were still standing in the doorway, looking confused and lost. I'm trying to change the terms. He turned to Seraphine. Lock the door. Keep them out. Or let them stay. I don't care anymore. Seraphine lowered her sword slightly. It wasn't a question. He walked past her, toward the exit. If they're diverting stock to create famine, they're using it as leverage elsewhere. We need to cut the supply line before they can sell another contract. Mother Sable stepped in his path. She was shorter than him, frail and trembling, but she held her ground. She asked. Milo stopped. He looked at her. And I know where they're lying. The square was empty now, the crowd having dispersed in confusion or fear. The rain fell hard, soaking Milo's clothes instantly.
So,
She looked at him sideways.
what now? You're an auditor with no assets.
Milo looked up at the sky. The clouds were black and heavy. Now I go to the tax ship, he said. I'm going to audit the crown. Seraphine laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound.
You're insane. They'll kill you. Probably.
He didn't stop walking.
But if I die, the ledger defaults to me. And I've already set it to void their claims on Giltwater.
Seraphine fell silent for a moment. Then she drew her sword again, not against him, but toward the harbor. Then lead the way, she said.
But don't expect me to hold back if they start shooting. I wouldn't dream of it.
He walked into the rain, his steps steady despite the exhaustion. The system was quiet now, but he knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting, and as he looked at the city around him, broken walls, flooded streets, starving people, he realized that saving them from famine was just the first step. The real war was for ownership, and Milo Vey was done letting other people hold the pen. The rain had finally stopped, leaving Giltwater slick with oil and victory. The square was still echoing with the roar of a city that had refused to die. I walked through the crowd, my boots splashing in puddles that reflected the burning braziers. Seraphine walked beside me, her hand resting on the hilt of a sword she hadn't needed to draw yet. "You did it," she said. Her eyes were wide, drinking in the sight of the crown's tax ships being dismantled by free hands. "You actually did it." "I balanced the books," I said.
That's all. Balancing books doesn't stop an executioner.
He shoved his way through, his face smeared with soot and grease. I saw the look in that warden's eyes. He was going to cut you down. "What did you say to make him freeze?" I reminded him of the law, I said. "The law is what we write now," Bram insisted. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "So who writes it? You? The man who woke up with a noose around his neck?" "We have a moment." Seraphine cut in, placing herself between us. "The people need to see the warden is alive, not hiding." "I am not hiding," I said. "I am working." "From where?" Bram demanded. "You're just staring at your monocle again. It's creepy, Milo, even for you." "It's necessary," I said. I pulled my arm free and turned toward the counting house. The building stood blackened against the dawn sky, a skeleton of stone and memory. "Come on, if we wait, the victory turns to hunger. And hunger doesn't care about audits." We entered the burned hall. The air smelled of ash and old paper. I walked straight to the vault at the rear, the door still ajar from my earlier extraction. Inside, the silence was heavy. The cracked monocle sat on the desk, its gold frame dull in the dim light. But as I reached for it, the room shifted. The contracts I had recovered were no longer static paper. They glowed with silver light, the ink rising from the pages like steam.
Look,
She stepped closer, her shadow falling across the desk.
what is happening?
"The ledgers are updating," I said. My voice felt distant. The silver lines pulsed, connecting one contract to another, stretching out beyond the walls of the counting house.
The Crown thought they owned the debt. They were wrong. Who owns it then?
He leaned over the desk, squinting at the glowing text.
It's not the City Council. It's not us. It's above us.
I said. The silver lines twisted, forming a map that covered the city, the river, and then the sky. The gods borrowed the laws of harvest, death, magic, and time from an entity beneath the moon. They never paid it back. The moon, Bram laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "You're telling me the moon is foreclosing on us?" "Not just the moon," I said. The projection grew brighter, filling the room with cold light. The debt is now due outside, the sky darkened. Not from clouds, from something moving in front of the sun. A black eclipse rose over Giltwater, swallowing the daylight. The temperature dropped. The silver lines on the contracts turned red. A voice speaks from the dark reflection in Milo's gold monocle. "Little warden, collect what you wish. At the end, I will collect you." The words didn't come from the room. They came from inside my head, resonating through the glass of the monocle. I flinched, backing away from the desk. Seraphine grabbed my shoulder. "Milo," she shouted, "what did you hear?" "I heard the invoice," I said. My hands were shaking, the red lines were everywhere now, burning into the walls, the floor, my skin. "The ultimate creditor has noticed us." "Who is it?" Bram demanded. He backed toward the door, fear finally piercing his bravado. "Is it a monster? A god?" "It's an audit," I said. The eclipse was total now. Giltwater was plunged into darkness, save for the red glow of the debt. World debt, unquantified, hidden asset detected. The moon below owes an original debt. New long-term objective. Audit the apocalypse. Translate that, warden? Bram yelled. "What does it mean? What do we have to pay?" "We don't pay," I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow.
We collect? From whom?
Her voice was steady, but her eyes were locked on the red lines consuming the vault. "From everyone who thinks they own the night," I said. I picked up the monocle. It was hot to the touch.
The Crown forgot their debt. So we're going to remind them. How?
He looked at the door, then back at me.
How do you fight an eclipse, Milo? You can't audit a shadow.
The red lines settled into a single point on my vision. A new line appeared beside Giltwater's name in the ledger of the world. It was empty, waiting.
But not here. Not yet then where?
She stepped closer, her hand still on the sword hilt.
The city is dark, Milo.
The people are scared. Seraphine did not drop her hand. Scared is good, she said, her voice cutting through the sudden silence that had fallen over the street outside. Fear makes people listen. It makes them work. Bram rubbed his arms, shivering in the unnatural chill. They need food, Seraphine. Not riddles. You told me we had a victory. This looks like a funeral. The monocle burned against my eye, but I refused to take it off. If I removed it now, the connection would fray and the city might slip back into the old rot.
And the first offer is on the table. What offer? The moon offering us dinner? Not the moon.
Seraphine corrected. She stepped toward the vault entrance, peering out at the darkened street. The anger flared hot in my chest, a reflexive defense against the sheer scale of what lay beneath us.
He is a creditor, and creditors do not make offers until they see collateral. Then show him the city.
He gestured wildly at the glowing red lines still etched into the stone walls. Let him see we are insolvent, that we have nothing left to lose. Seraphine turned back to me, her face illuminated by the harsh crimson glow of the ledger. Collect from whom? The crown is gone. The nobles are in hiding. Who do you think has the debt? The world, I said. The laws we live by, harvest, death, magic, time. They were loans. And now the interest is due. Bram let out a bitter laugh. You're losing it, Milo. You're talking like one of those aristocrats who think they can pay for the sun to rise. We need grain. We need walls. We need to know if we are going to freeze tonight. I will get you grain, I said. The words came out flat, devoid of the hesitation that usually plagued me, but not from a granary, from the sky itself. Seraphine frowned. How, and what leverage does a city of starving rats have against a celestial body? Bram demanded. He kicked at a pile of ash, sending it swirling around his boots. You cannot audit gravity, Warden. You cannot foreclose on the night. The silver light pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Seraphine watched me closely. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. You're going to charge rent. Bram stared at me as if I had grown a second head. You're insane. You're actually insane. Outside, the black eclipse began to shift. A sliver of sunlight broke through the darkness, hitting the roof of the counting house. The red lines in the room dimmed slightly, but did not vanish. They waited, watching.
When does it collect? 2 years.
I said.
The system gave us 2 years.
Bram's face went pale. 2 years? We don't have 2 days. You will, I said.
Because for the first time in history, Giltwater is not paying anyone else. We are keeping every coin we earn until the debt is cleared. That means you stop complaining about the terms and start enforcing them. Enforcing what? Citizen debt relief begins now. All personal debts to the crown are void, but all labor owed to the city is doubled. You want food, Bram? You work for it? You want walls? You build them.
Bram opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the door, then back at me. If we refuse, and I will not be able to stop it. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Seraphine reached out and took Bram's arm, pulling him back from the edge of the room. He means it, she said. Her voice was low, serious. Look at his eyes. Bram. He sees it all. The lines. The debts. If he says the moon is watching, then the moon is watching. Bram swallowed hard. He looked at the glowing contracts on the desk, then at my face and the monocle's reflection. And what do we call this? This new arrangement? The free ledger, I said.
Giltwater is no longer collateral. It is an asset, and assets must be protected. By whom?
Seraphine asked.
You're just one man with a cracked glass eye.
The title felt heavier now, anchored by the weight of the sky above. Bram threw his hands up, turning away from my desk. You're turning us into slaves to save our skins? My voice remained level, though the monocle throbbed against my temple like a second heartbeat. Seraphine crossed her arms, her leather armor creaking softly in the dim light.
A creditor who owns nothing but fear. Is that not just a debt collector with better PR? Time we don't have.
Pacing toward the window, he peered out at the darkened street, where the first torches were being lit by shivering citizens.
People are panicking, Milo. Not because of the eclipse, because they think you've lost your mind. They think the warden has gone mad trying to audit the sky. Let them talk.
She stepped closer to me, her eyes narrowing.
I can see the truth in your face. You're not mad. You're terrified. And if you're terrified, so is everyone else.
Management? Bram laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You call locking us into a debt with a celestial body management? What about the walls? The repair crews you promised? You say we are building them, but who is going to build them if they're starving? With contracts. Contracts? Seraphine raised an eyebrow. You think hunger can be signed away?
Obligation. If I forgive the Crown's claim on their grain, they owe me that grain and labor. It is a simple swap. The Crown loses its collateral, we gain our workforce. And if they say no...
He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his hands clenched into fists. If they refuse to work? If they riot? Then I collect from them directly, I said. The words came out cold, detached.
I will take their future wages and apply them to the city's survival. It is fair. It is tyranny.
He slammed his hand against the desk, making the contracts jump.
You are becoming exactly what we fought against, a bureaucrat with a whip.
Seraphine stepped between us, her sword hilt clacking against her thigh. Enough. Bram glared at her, breathing heavily. He's right, she said to me, ignoring Bram's protest. It looks like tyranny. It feels like tyranny. But it is survival. Survival requires trust, I said. And trust requires transparency. Transparency? Bram sneered. You're hiding behind your ledger. I tapped the glass of the monocle. The red lines flared brighter, illuminating the room in a bloody hue. I see every ounce of debt owed to every soul in this city, and I see that the Crown's breach is total. They took our money but didn't keep our walls standing. They collected protection taxes for a defense that never existed. So what? Bram spat. You forgive their debts. That doesn't bring back the food. It doesn't fix the roof. It starts the audit, I said.
And audits are painful. But they reveal the truth. The Crown is insolvent. They cannot pay us for what they stole, but we can seize their assets to cover our losses. What assets?
Her voice was quiet, intent.
The Crown has nothing but titles and empty vaults.
Not anymore, I said. The city is the asset, and as the new warden, I am liquidating it. Bram stared at me, horrified. You're selling Giltwater? I'm restructuring it, I corrected.
Into a free ledger. Bound to the Ash March clans instead of the Crown. A sovereign entity. No more taxes. No more seizures. Just obligation.
His voice dropped to a whisper.
To you? To the system.
I said.
To the rules that govern us all. Even the gods.
Seraphine looked at me, her expression unreadable. And what do the Ash March clans get out of this? They didn't fight for Giltwater's freedom. They will, I said, because they want the river trade. And the river trade is now under our control. We hold the keys to the water. If they want to move their goods, they pay us. In gold, or in grain, or in blood. Bram shook his head, backing away from the desk. You're playing with fire, Milo. The Ash March clans don't negotiate. They take. Let them try, I said. The monocle burned hotter, searing my skin.
I have the law on my side now, and the law is absolute.
She looked out the window at the darkening sky.
Until the 2 years are up.
Until then.
I said.
And if we fail, don't finish that sentence.
He turned his back on me, walking to the door.
I'm not dying for your little experiment.
If you leave, I said, my voice rising slightly, you are admitting default, and default has consequences. Bram paused at him, turned back, his face pale in the sickly red light. I leave because I have nothing left to give a man who speaks to ghosts. He yanked the door open. We will see if your free ledger bleeds as well as it talks. The door slammed shut. Seraphine watched the wood settle, then looked at me. He is afraid. You made him afraid. Fear keeps them alive, I said. Confusion kills them faster. She stepped toward the vault stairs. Then show me what is left. If we are to be creditors, I need to see the collateral. It is not here anymore, I said. My voice was flat. The monocle burned against my eye socket, hot and heavy. Seraphine froze. What do you mean? She climbed the first step, then stopped. Her hand hovered over the railing. Milo, what did you find in the deep vault? I pulled a single sheet of parchment from my coat. It was blank. I found nothing, because there is no debt left. Liar, she whispered. You found something. I found the truth, I said, and the truth is that Giltwater is now owned by the moon. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. Tell me what you saw. Go back to the streets, Seraphine. Guard the walls. Watch the people. Milo. She shook me hard. I need to know what is happening to us. I pulled away gently. You don't want to know. Her eyes widened. Why not? Because once you know, I said, turning toward the window, you cannot unsee the invoice.